In this tutorial, I want to go back to basics. More and more amateur videographers are choosing Vegas Pro due to its timeline editing simplicity. However, some of its vast number of video effects can be quite daunting to the new user. One of these is the Bezier Masking Tool. It's a powerful tool, but its numerous parameters can make the learning curve quite steep. I'll try and make this curve shallower. I make no apologies for the amount of detail I use. I do this to make the tool easier to understand for the Vegas Pro novice. The tutorial is not intended for the Vegas Pro expert. I'm using Vegas Pro 22, but the method is the same for earlier versions. I'll start by placing a solid color event onto the timeline. I'll also place a solid color event on the track below. Vegas Pro's track structure is hierarchical, so video events on one track take priority over video events on the ones below. Because of this, the blue event is hidden by the yellow event. Applying a mask to the yellow event provides a means whereby a part or the whole of the blue event can be exposed. As with any other video effect, the video effect browser is opened up by clicking the FX icon on the yellow event. This opens the plugin chooser, where I'll select Bezier Masking. The user interface appears and the default rectangular mask is applied to the event. If we disregard the normal parameters at the top of the UI, which are common to all video effects, the basic user interface consists of 6 sections. I'll deal with each one in turn. The top checkbox determines whether the mask is inverted. For instance, with it unchecked, the blue event shows through everything except the mask. If I select the checkbox, the blue event shows through the mask only. The next checkbox determines whether subsequent video effects applied to the event are enabled. We'll get to that later on. The blend parameter determines the amount of blend applied to the event. With a value of 0, no blend is applied, meaning that the masked event is pure and not blended with the blue event. A value of 1 applies maximum blend, which makes the blue event merge fully into the yellow event. The blend parameter is very useful when drawing a mask around an object. I'll explain that in the next part, hopefully. The use of the motion tracking button is beyond the scope of this tutorial, so I won't be dealing with this here. The Bezier Masking Tool allows up to 5 masks to be defined. The options for each mask are identical, so I'll just describe the options for one of them. At first sight, this part of the UI looks quite daunting. Hopefully I'll make this not so. Down the right side of the UI are the animation icons. Selecting one of these enables its associated parameter to be animated with keyframes. The icon is enabled when the small plus sign changes to a small red cross. I'll deal with basic keyframe animation at the end of this tutorial. The first parameter checkbox enables the mask. Because it's the first mask, it's enabled by default. Unchecking this simply disables the mask and all its parameters. The type parameter determines the type of mask. In the drop-down list, there are 4 types. The top 3 are self-explanatory. The bottom one, curve, allows you to draw the mask freehand. More on this in part 2. The next 3 parameters are fairly self-explanatory. The width and height values range from 0 to 1, 1 being the full width or height of the preview. As with all parameters of this type, values can be entered into the parameter field or adjusted by dragging the sliders. It's important to note that the datum for width and height is the center of the mask. This means that increasing the width, for instance, causes the mask to increase from the center of the mask. If you hold the Control key down while dragging the slider, finer increments are obtained. Double-clicking on a slider will return it to its default position. The mask can also be manipulated using the on-screen controls. The angle parameter adjusts the angle of the mask. The range is -180 to +180 degrees. The angle can also be adjusted using the on-screen circle control. The opacity parameter adjusts the transparency of the mask. 0 is fully transparent, 1 is fully opaque. The next parameter applies a feather to the edges of the mask. The range is 0 to 50. I'll set this to 10. The feather style drop-down list has 3 options, the default being both. As you can see, this means that the feather is applied to both the inside and outside edges of the mask. The last parameter is location. It consists of 2 parameter values and a square with crosshairs. The left-hand value adjusts the X or horizontal position, and the right-hand one the Y or vertical position. Note that the values refer to the position of the center of the mask, 0 being the bottom left corner of the display and 1 being the top right corner. As mentioned before, the position can be adjusted on screen by clicking and holding the mask, then dragging into position. The crosshairs can also be used. Fine increments can be achieved if you hold the Control key down while dragging the crosshairs. If the crosshairs are used, normally they can't be moved beyond the edge of the square. However, it is possible to move the crosshairs beyond the boundary. Hold the Shift key down and movement beyond the boundary is possible. Note that there's a limit to how far you can move the mask off screen. This amounts to a factor of 1 to the screen boundary value. For instance, the limit to the left of the screen is -1. The limit above the screen is 2. If you want to see the mask, you can zoom out of the screen using the mouse scroll wheel. This means that you can grab it and bring it back on screen. Don't forget to restore the screen magnification by double-clicking the mouse wheel. You won't see the crosshairs when the mask is off screen, but they can be brought back by clicking the small dot where they exited the box. The mask can also be moved off screen by entering values greater than 1 or less than 0 into the parameter value field. As I mentioned though, the limits are -1 and 2. Let's look at a practical application. A common use of Bezier masking is to blur out the face of someone, commonly called the witness protection effect. For this simple application, I'm going to blur out this lady's face. I start by applying the Bezier masking effect to the event. The default rectangular mask is applied. For this example, I need a circle, so I'll change the mask type to oval. Now I'll use the on-screen controls to manipulate the mask. Now I'll feather the edge a little. I'll leave the type at both. Now to apply the blur effect. To do this, I click on the FX plus icon above the floppy disk icon. This opens the plugin chooser. For the blur, I'll choose the Gaussian blur effect. Now I have to click the Add button, then the OK button. I'll leave the setting at default and select the Bezier Masking tab to open its UI. To complete the operation, the Gaussian blur effect must be placed before the Bezier masking effect. Do this by clicking and holding on the Gaussian blur tab, then dragging it to before the Bezier masking tab. You'll know when you've dragged it far enough because a red line will show just before the Bezier masking tab. Now select the Bezier Masking tab and open up the General Options section. Finally, click the Mask FX checkbox. You can now adjust the mask further before closing the UI. I'll play the video. The subject doesn't move much in this video, but the mask, because it's stationary, fails to fully cover her face near the end. A simple movement such as this, keyframing the location parameter, is all that's needed. For videos where there is a wide variety of movement, keyframing is not a viable option. In those cases, motion tracking has to be used. With the playhead at the start of the event, I'll enable animation for the location parameter. With animation enabled, the keyframe controller opens up at the bottom of the UI. The functionality of the keyframe controller is far beyond the scope of this tutorial, so I won't be describing this. A keyframe is automatically created for the two location parameters, X and Y, at the beginning of the keyframe controller. The beginning of its timeline corresponds to the beginning of the video event. Now I need to move the playhead to a position where the mask starts to deviate from the lady's head. Before I do so, I need to make sure that the small icon at the bottom left of the UI is enabled. It's blue when enabled. This is the Sync Cursor to Media Timeline icon, and make sure that when I move the timeline playhead, the keyframe controller cursor follows it. At this point, I'll add a keyframe. Keyframes are added using the Add Keyframe icon. Now I'll move the playhead to see how far the mask deviates. In this case, the mask doesn't deviate any further than it has already. If the playhead is at the end of the event, as it is here, it's advisable to place the keyframe at the start of the last frame. This can be done with the frame backwards icon. With the playhead at the start of the final frame, I'll move the mask so that it's back in place. This will add another keyframe. So that's a very detailed introduction to the Bezier Masking Tool. In the next part, I'll deal with the subject of freehand masks and their manipulation. Thank you for sticking with me, and please subscribe if you haven't already done so. Until the next time, bye for now.